watching the Brexit developments unfold in the British Parliament this week, and I thought Boris Johnson had inherited a Chinese menu, sweet and sour. He did win his first ever parliamentary vote since becoming Prime Minister with a yes for a deal and a British exit from the EU. That's the sweet bit. But he couldn't ram it through without extended debate and more amendments. And that meant it would mean a further delay, probably past October 31, the deadline. So for the latest, we cross to Professor Benjamin Laker from the Henley Business School. Professor, good evening.
Good evening to you.
Look, it's he could say, well, I had one win this week, which is a first for him, but the complications are still there in a big way, aren't they?
Absolutely, and as you said, like the Chinese meal, you're always left hungry, you always need a little bit more, and Boris Johnson, he certainly needs more, and we're hearing at the moment the European Union are deliberating and discussing exactly how much more time they're going to give with regard to an extension, which is, of course, something that Boris Johnson didn't want, and yet he's also facing huge pressures back here in the UK. He's trying to get a general election, but of course he doesn't actually have the power to do that himself. He needs a little bit more from the Labour Party, and they actually at the moment do not look as though they want to give him a general election.
Isn't this a bit weird that we've suddenly got an opposition in power that is voting against a general election when a year ago, when Theresa May was there, they're bitching and moaning, saying, take us to an election, take us to an election. Now I think they're looking at some of the polls and saying, I can see why they don't want one.
Yeah, absolutely true. And they are not wanting to give the general election to Boris Johnson because they feel that he will clean up at that general election. And at the moment, keeping him in power, albeit restrained power, because at every which way and turn they're going to restrain him by throwing amendments and voting down certain things that he wants to get over the line, is actually making him look very weak as a leader. And they believe, and their hope is that over time, if they weaken him enough, at the point in which an election is occurring, that they will have a better chance of winning that general election.
Yeah, but I mean, looking at it from a long, long way away, it would seem that he has sort of got a deal. If the EU, I saw one report as I was coming on air tonight saying, thinking that the EU is going to grant the extension, but maybe not until right through to the end of January. It would mean, of course, that he's seen saying, by hook or by crook, we're out of there on October 31. But if they gave them like another month, would that be enough to wound him dramatically? Because he can say, well, down the track, we've got the deal. I said I'd get you out of the EU, and I will, and I have.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And if you look, his rhetoric is now changing. He is not making any reference to the do or die claims that he would take the UK out of the EU by October 31st. What he's now saying is, absolutely, we will exit the European Union with this deal. And he's not time boxing it deliberately because he's actually unable to do so. And at the moment, the specific timings, whether it is going to be 3 months, that's what Germany wants. But actually, we've heard today Emmanuel Macron and France, they would like it as little as 15 days. So even within the European Union, they can't decide how long the extension, or what they're calling it, the flex extension, is to be. But my bet will be it is January, it will be 3 months, and hopefully this will be the absolute last extension that will occur.
But I mean, Boris Johnson would love 15 days if that's an alternative. He'd grab at that in a minute, wouldn't he?
Well, absolutely true. I think he does not want a 3-month delay, because if putting more pressure on Parliament to vote for his deal is what's needed, then absolutely that's the effective strategy for him. And of course, France are more aligned to do that because they, like the EU, like the UK, sorry, are absolutely sick of Brexit. They want some resolution, and as much of the UK does. But what we're hearing is the vast majority of EU member states are probably going to align with Germany, and I think what we will therefore see is the 3-month or at least 3-month extension proposed.
Yeah. And if, just a final point, if in fact they do get to a general election, is the general feeling, this is what we get over here, is that Boris Johnson will win?
At the moment, he's significantly ahead in the polls. And despite Labour's antics, that's actually going very poorly with the electorate. They see exactly what is happening. And from their perspective, a political party should always be ready to call and fight for a general election. And in doing not that, that's very cowardly, it's very tactical. And the people want their say on this issue. And many people have called for a second referendum that may not happen, partly because the general election is the referendum. You will align with the party who best represents your views. Boris Johnson's views on the situation are very clear. Labour's are not. So expect Boris Johnson at the moment, the polls are correct, he's significantly ahead. And at the moment, the behaviour from Labour is actually pushing him further ahead in the polls.
I think you're right. Professor Laker, I thank you for your time. We'll talk again.